I'm sitting in my house. It's a beautiful day, I think. The sun is shining, and it's a wonderful, wonderful time out here. So, love to be back with you guys, and I will be back with you guys next week. So, but can't wait for that. But in lieu of that, we have another lesson to go over today. One announcement, you've heard it before, but please make sure you're turning in and working on and working toward your Eagle Impact requirement for this quarter. It will be due on May 27th, and make sure you have 3 hours of community service. You can turn this in on Google Classroom or during class. Please let me know if you have any questions whatsoever about that. So today we're going to be talking about 3 different things in brief. One is alcohol. The second one is marijuana, because that's the controversial drug of choice, I would say, more so than like heroin or cocaine. Marijuana is more controversial because it's becoming more legal. And so what does the Bible say? What is the Christian stance there? And then we're going to be talking about vaping at the very, very end. So alcohol, marijuana, and vape. Let's get started. So alcohol, a couple facts. There are 88,000 deaths annually that are caused by alcohol. Now, this is not all driving deaths, but they do include driving deaths, but maybe some alcohol poisoning, so on and so forth. So 88,000 deaths annually in the United States. This is the 3rd leading preventable cause of death in the United States. I would say obesity is also up there on the charts of leading preventable causes of death. Alcohol is the cause of 31% of driving fatalities in the United States every single year. Also, alcohol misuse has cost the United States $249 billion. So people not being wise with their alcohol and doing things and making havoc and causing wrecks and all that stuff costs us a lot of money. It's also the cause of diseases and various conditions like liver cirrhosis, where your liver is just basically eaten away and diseased because of alcohol. Cancer has been linked to alcohol as well, and alcohol dependence. People can become addicted to alcohol. Yes, that's called an alcoholic. So, is it wrong to drink? Well, my first point here is that underage drinking is wrong. Now, you might say, well, Mr. Martin, if it's good for people that are of age in the United States, like 21, to drink, then why is it bad for me at 15 to drink? And for that, I say we are called as Christians to obey the laws of the land. And I know people who that can get arrested for underage drinking or serving alcohol to minors. If I were to bring a case of beer to a teenage youth event or something like that and started passing out beers to high schoolers, guess what would happen to me if there's a police officer? I would get arrested for serving alcohol to minors and providing alcohol to minors. So if there is a crime that is being committed by the person who can buy and then distribute alcohol to the minors, then probably we shouldn't be doing it. But in addition to that, one of the things is you're not equipped to make an intelligent decision as you're younger. Maybe you think something is a good idea, but then it's not a good idea. Have you ever done that before, where you thought it'd be a great idea to stay up till 3 a.m. talking to whoever or whatever, but then you had to wake up at 6 a.m. to get ready for school, and you're like, that wasn't a good decision to stay up super, super late. I'm still learning that one as time goes on, but I'm becoming more and more happy with the decision of going to bed earlier because I don't like being cranky in the mornings. Also, if you drink at 15 years old, so you start drinking at 15 years old, you're 5 times more likely to develop alcohol dependence than those who begin drinking at or after 21 years old. I think this has something to do with your brain still developing at those stages, and you become more alcohol dependent or likely to have an alcohol addiction or dependence as you get older than if you would just wait 6 more years. I know, long time, 6 more years, and start drinking at age 21. So I would say that. But for those of you that have parents and siblings that drink, are they sinning because they occasionally drink? Well, there's a lot of verses here. We're not going to go over all of them. Please stop the video actually here and read these individually, or look them up if you're looking at PowerPoint or something like that, because they do address alcohol one way or another. And I think it's good to know what the Bible teaches about alcohol. So this is a good reference for you. There's 7 verses there that all address alcohol and drunkenness and such like that. Just to give you a good glimpse that the Bible does mention alcohol a lot. So what can we deduce from these verses after having read them? Wine was drunk in the Bible by biblical characters. That's something that you have to notice. You cannot take away wine from the Bible. It just doesn't make any sense, because like Noah drank wine, and you have Solomon, and you have Jesus, and you have Paul even suggesting to his spiritual son Timothy to drink wine because he was suffering from dysentery, and the wine would help his stomach to feel better. So wine was drunk in the Bible by biblical characters. However, as we already talked before, it was most likely less alcohol. Please note this. It was diluted with water, because there's a proverb that says wisdom has mixed her wine with water, right? Wisdom has mixed her wine. So it's most likely less alcohol than what we have today, like a 1 to 3%, rather than what we have today, like 3 to 5 on the low end, and then plus 10 if you're drinking wine, and plus 20 if you're drinking liquors and stuff like that. So definitely a lot less alcoholic content. We can also deduce that drunkenness is a sin. Drunkenness was never, ever one time mentioned in a positive light in the Bible. So we know the Bible, yes, drinking wine was not bad. However, whenever someone got drunk, they always were looked down upon, and sometimes it even led them to do sinful and disgraceful things that did not honor or please God. Take Lot, for example, right? His daughters get him drunk because their husbands have died, and they're like, we need to have a family line. We need to, our husbands can't do this because they passed away, and we have no other hope. And they just, in this moment of desperation, they get their father drunk. This is a crazy thing. They get their father drunk, and he sleeps with them, sleeps with his own daughters, because he's drunk. And that's frowned upon. And that's whenever you have the nations of Ammon and Moab coming into play there. So drunkenness is a sin. You'll do things, more likely to do things, not guaranteed, but more likely to do things that are sinful than if you were sober. And then wisdom with drinking is required always. Chokmah, not just knowing the right thing, but doing the right thing. Knowing where your limit is and sticking to it are very important principles to remember whenever you drink, if you choose to drink in the future. So the next point, abstinence from alcohol. This is an interesting take. So some people will never drink wine, beer, liquor, anything to remove the possibility of getting drunk. So some people would just say, you know what, I never want to have it, never want to taste it, don't want it in my house, don't want to be offered it, nothing like that. Not because they hate it, not because they think it's a sin, but just because they don't want the possibility of them ever getting drunk and discrediting the gospel ultimately. And so the Assemblies of God, which is the denomination of the church and as well as the school, they hold this view of abstinence. So all pastors in the Assemblies of God hold this view of abstinence from alcohol. So Assemblies of God pastors do not drink. I know there's some other denominations that will also hold this view as well. I don't know them off the top of my head, but the Assemblies of God holds this view as well with alcohol. So the next one, marijuana. Marijuana. A couple things. Marijuana produces more of a euphoric feeling. So this is the high, the feel-good feeling, right? It's a controversial topic, especially in Christian circles, because as we are becoming more and more legal with marijuana, and it's becoming more accessible across the United States. States are saying, you know what, we can legalize medicinal marijuana, we can legalize recreational marijuana. More and more Christians in those states are faced with this, okay, just because it's legal, can I use it now, or should I still not use it? Also, there's some benefits to smoking pot. We'll look at those in a little bit. Recreational marijuana, I just want to go over this. It's legal in 17 states across the United States, DC and Guam. So we have, 33 states where it is not legal. But even in those 33 states where it's not legal, it is still legal to a certain degree for many of them. And the first state to legalize marijuana recreationally was Colorado. Go figure, Colorado. They have dispensaries all over the place, apparently. They led the charge of legalizing recreational marijuana in 2012. So medicinal marijuana or medical marijuana, people that argue for it will say this: most drugs we prescribe are worse than pot. And I would agree that most drugs we prescribe are worse than pot, like oxycodone and hydrocodone and very strong painkillers. They tear up your body and they're very addictive, and we have seen people get addicted and have the opioid crisis because of these things. And so for that reason, I agree with people who are arguing for medical marijuana from the stance that most drugs we prescribe are worse, more addictive, and more harmful to your body than pot is. So from that aspect, you can see that. Medical marijuana uses, there's glaucoma, which helps your eyesight. Whenever you use marijuana for glaucoma, can relieve that tension and that pressure. Pain relief is good. Appetite stimulant, ever heard of the munchies? Well, that's what marijuana helps with. So if you can't eat, I guess you smoke pot so you can eat. Also, cancer prevention, maybe. Doesn't cure cancer. Please know this. But there are links to prevention. So there's no cure for cancer in marijuana. However, there have been links and studies that show that smoking pot might prevent cancer. Who knows? But there are also negatives of marijuana: altered senses, dizziness, tiredness, fatigue, reduced coordination and balance, cognitive impairment, anxiety, panic, paranoia, hallucinations, mood alterations, altered blood pressure, increased heart rate, cough, sore throat, blurred vision, dry eyes, skin rash, increased appetite, tooth discoloration, nausea and vomiting, dry mouth, and flushing, to say the least. Now, not that you experience all those every time, or that you even experience any of those, but these have been reported side effects or negatives of marijuana. So the arguments for marijuana: one, it's natural, so therefore we can smoke it and we can use it because it comes from the ground. There's more deaths that we've seen via smoking cigarettes and also using alcohol and drinking alcohol. So if we're going to say that we can't use pot, then we should say we can't use alcohol and we can't smoke cigarettes anymore, because that just doesn't make any sense. Why we would legalize smoking and legalize alcohol whenever there's more harm being caused by those two things. But then you have this question here: is it wrong to get high? That's a good question to think about, because, at the end of the day, that's what many people, besides the medical marijuana people, that's what many people are using marijuana for, is to get high, to kind of escape reality, to feel good, to kind of be in this euphoric state, rather than be part of reality in the normal state with the normal emotions and all that stuff. And so my question here is, what's your intent? What's your intent behind getting high? What's your intent? So is marijuana a gateway drug? Because a lot of people will say it's a gateway drug. It's not, actually. It's not a gateway drug. The idea of marijuana being a gateway drug is illogical, and here's why. If you're going to say that marijuana is a gateway drug, you have to show cause and effect. You have to show that people who smoke pot will then go and use other drugs that are harder and more severe. and more serious and more deadly to the body. And we just don't see that cause and effect. If you want a better gateway drug, though, nicotine is a much better gateway drug. We have seen a little bit more cause and effect of people who use nicotine or cigarettes and then go on to use other drugs as well. Also, people smoke pot and they don't become addicts. So there are people, I don't know how many, but there are people who smoke pot and never become addicts. And then correlation, just because somebody is associated with other drugs doesn't mean that pot was the thing that caused it. So correlation doesn't equal causation. So pot, not a gateway drug. If you want a better one, choose nicotine, but I hope that you don't choose either. The argument against using marijuana, however, comes from a passage in Galatians chapter 5, verse 21. And we see this word where Paul says, Paul uses drunkenness there, which can be translated inebriated, and intoxication. So inebriation and intoxication are two sides of the same coin, really the same word there. And so the argument against pot kind of goes like this: because whenever you smoke pot, it creates a different feeling in your mind to allow you to do things that you wouldn't normally do if you weren't high. Not saying that you're going to be sinning every single time, but you might, because you're in a different state and you're kind of less self-control, right? We want to have self-control as Christians. We don't want to sacrifice that self-control by any stretch. And so kind of creates this different feeling that might cause you to do different things if you weren't high. And so that's the line when you've lost your soberness, whenever you start to do things that you wouldn't normally do, or say things that you normally wouldn't say, or act a certain way that you normally wouldn't act because you were high. That's when you lost your soberness. I would say that's the line whenever you begin to sin. So the biblical principle concerning marijuana and other drugs is the same as drinking. Intoxication is sinful, right? And although there's a possibility to drink without getting intoxicated, it is much more likely to become intoxicated via marijuana. Here's the reason why. Common THC content of marijuana whenever you smoke, whatever use you want to get this into your body, into your system, is at least 30 milligrams. From scientific research, the amount of THC that you need to get intoxicated in your body occurs at the ingestion of less than 7 milligrams of THC, which is very early on. So if you're saying that, okay, I can smoke it and just not get high and therefore I'm not sinning, the line is so thin. You would literally have to maybe take 1 or 2, if that even hits. And maybe you're still going to get high off that because the ingestion of 7 milligrams of THC happens so quick whenever you smoke marijuana. So that's the idea there. Intoxication is sinful, and intoxication for marijuana occurs very quickly, very quickly. And so while there might be a bigger gap between soberness and drunkenness with alcohol, there's a much smaller gap between soberness and intoxication with drugs and drug use in general with marijuana. So yes, it's sinful to get high. Recreational use of marijuana is usually to become high or intoxicated. A quote from a guy named Joe Carter from the Gospel Coalition says this: if the intent of the recreational use of marijuana is to achieve some level of intoxication, and also say if the use of alcohol is to achieve drunkenness, then it is clearly a sinful action. What about CBD though? This is interesting. This is interesting. So a couple points here. CBD oil products contain little to no THC. So it's the CBD side of the marijuana plant rather than the THC side. This is all the health benefits. So maybe you've seen different dispenser or different CBD stores or different stores just selling CBD oil. You might even go to a coffee shop in the future and they have CBD cold brew and just stuff like that, right? CBD is popping up all over the place, and it's causing a little bit of controversy with Christians because it's like, isn't that weed? Isn't that marijuana? So to clarify a little bit, CBD and marijuana, using CBD oil and smoking marijuana are not the same thing, and it goes back to everything with this THC content, because there's little to no THC content in CBD oil and their products. There is little to no chance that you can get high. Many positives with it: anti-inflammatory, anti-anxiety, seizure prevention, so on and so forth. I want to even say that people have gotten even better sleep because they use CBD. So there's a lot of positives. There's not a lot of negatives that we've seen with CBD. So Christians are slowly becoming more open to CBD as it gains popularity in a lot of your bigger cities. So as always, make your own judgments, use wisdom. But yes, again, there is little to no chance that you could actually get high off of CBD oil products unless it accidentally was laced with THC or had THC in it, which if you're getting normal CBD oil stuff, shouldn't have it. And last but not least, we have vaping. What do we do about this? Because I sometimes see students vaping in the bathroom. My 4 years here, I've caught a couple students vaping in the bathroom and been suspicious of others who deny it. What do we do about vaping? I think it's calmed down a little bit, thank God. But it's an alternative to smoking tobacco, which is good, I guess. Its popularity is increasing so much, especially among high school and middle school students. I want to say these numbers are higher because I did this 3 years ago. So 38% of high school students have tried, 13% of middle school students have tried that were willing to admit. So I would say these numbers are probably a little higher now than they were 3 years ago. Also, the legal age for buying vape pens in the US is 18. I want to say it's actually 21 now. So don't quote me on this 18 age. It might actually be 21 now. You guys probably know a little bit more than I do about this specific age. Again, this was from 3 years ago. If you can't buy it, maybe that's a clue that you shouldn't use it. Not that it's sinful, but shouldn't use it. Vaping does not always mean consuming nicotine, which is a good thing. So studies have shown that teen vaping usually does not include nicotine. Usually they're done for like flavors or just the appearance, really water vapor, really just the appearance of smoking and vaping, but there's nothing really going into the system that you can tell. And there's no addiction, right? No nicotine, no addiction, and no other drugs, no other substances that are going into the system as well. So the argument is, if there's no nicotine, then what's the big deal? What's the thought here? Well, I think the big thing that a lot of people are starting to realize is that vaping is actually really harmful to your body. There's this chemical called diacetyl or diacetyl, however you want to pronounce it. And it's a chemical associated with popcorn lung. Maybe you've heard of that before. This is a scarring of the tiny air sacs in the lungs, resulting in the thickening and narrowing of the airways from the American Lung Association. Why did it get the name popcorn lungs? Well, it was taken out of popcorn products because factory workers, where they made these popcorn products, were inhaling it, and then they were developing this disease called popcorn lung, and so they termed it popcorn lung. Whenever you vape, you directly inhale diacetyl. Not a good thing, because you're putting your body at risk for developing this disease, or scarring of your tiny air sacs in the lungs, resulting in the thickening and narrowing of the airways. That is not good. This is found in 75% of e-cigarettes. That is astronomical. We should use this as a way to monitor this. Now, again, we might find that these companies are decreasing the amount of diacetyl, but beware. There are chemicals in vapes and e-cigarettes that can harm your body. What about other chemicals? Acetone and 2,3-pentanedione. These are alternatives to diacetyl. 92% of e-cigarettes have one of these three chemicals in their e-cigarettes. So that's a very high number. So you're most likely going to get one of these chemicals, and they are alternatives to diacetyl or diacetyl itself, but it can still be harmful to your body. Manufacturers are also in the clear for the next year or so until further testing results come out. This was 3 years ago, so I don't know how much they're in the clear for anymore, because I started seeing commercials talking about how terrible vaping can be to your lungs. So I feel like they're like, oh yeah, this was actually a really bad idea. We should have probably never actually let this thing go to market. But we did, and now we have a bunch of kids that have lungs of like 70-year-olds because we told them that it might not be harmful to vape and didn't really educate people well. This was not good for the USDA to do. This was, or the FDA to do, Food Drug Administration. This was awful whenever they did this, because the language from their report said this: basically, we don't know what vaping does to your body long term. So while we figure that out, we're going to continue to allow these products to be on the shelf. It could be harmful. It could be terrible. And you know what they found out? It was harmful. Go figure, right? You have these chemicals that are harmful to your body. And now we're trying to figure out, okay, what in the world can we do? I would have said, wisdom, hindsight's 2020. Yeah, Juul's not going to make a lot of money, which they already sold their company from what I understand. And all these other companies, they're not going to make as much money, but at least they'll have a good conscience than knowing they didn't ruin the lives of little kids and teenagers and adults across the United States. Just my thoughts. Here's some articles if you'd like to use them later and access them later. So a conclusion for all three, a biblical argument. First Thessalonians 5:22. So what should we do about alcohol, vaping, drug use, but marijuana specifically? 1 Thessalonians 5:22 says, stay away from the appearance of evil. This is everything for keeping the gospel credible. Well, that's one of the big things that Paul is so keen on whenever he writes and whenever he ministers. He wants to make sure the credibility of the gospel is not lost based on how we live our lives. And so we should be mindful of the actions that we're doing and how they might appear to other people. And does this help or does this hurt the gospel? I'm not saying drinking falls into that. I'm not saying smoking marijuana falls into that. I'm not saying vaping falls into that. But what I am saying is be mindful and ask yourself the question, is this helping or is this hurting the gospel of Jesus Christ? If it's helping, cool. If it's hurting, then now you're putting the message of Christianity on the line and putting it at risk because of your decisions and your choices. Also, 1 Corinthians 6:19-20 talks about this. Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, and that you are not your own? For you have been bought with a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body. Love that. I love that. And as we drink and as we consider drinking and alcohol, as we consider drug use and marijuana, and as we consider vaping, the question goes again, are you glorifying God in your body when you do these things? I think you might be able to make a case for casual, not getting drunk drinking. You might be able to make a case for it, but I don't see how strong of a case, knowing what we know about vaping and drug use and marijuana specifically, where you can make a case for glorifying God in your body while you're getting high or while you're destroying your body as well with chemicals and stuff like that. Which might also go to eating, but this isn't talking about eating right now. So don't be a glutton. Last but not least, if our bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit, why would we want to do anything to dishonor that? It's a good question. Consider it. See what you think. Some reflection questions for you guys on Google Classroom, though. What is the view of the Assemblies of God on alcohol? What is that view? Is marijuana a gateway drug? Why or why not? Is it wrong to get high? Why or why not? And what is the common lung disease caused by vaping? Please answer these questions in a Google Doc on Google Classroom and turn that in for a reflection on this PowerPoint. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful day.